It was getting late, shadows stretching across the floor of my office. I was alone, just me and the click-clack of my keyboard. Everyone else had gone home hours ago, but I had a deadline to meet. The fluorescent lights hummed above, casting a sterile glow on the empty desks around me. I glanced at my watch. 11:47 p.m. Just as I was saving my work, I heard it, a faint sound like someone was shuffling papers in the next cubicle. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I listened intently, but the sound didn't return. "Must be the wind," I muttered to myself, trying to rationalize the eerie noise in the otherwise silent office. Back at my desk, I tried to focus on my work, but the strange occurrence had shaken me. I decided to turn on the radio, just for some background noise. I tuned in to a talk radio station, hoping to find something to distract me, but the voices seemed distant and distorted, failing to penetrate the bubble of unease that had enveloped me. I glanced at the clock again. 12:32 a.m. Just a few more emails to send, then I could finally get out of here. As I was finishing up my last email, I heard the sound again. This time it was clearer, closer. Someone was definitely in the next cubicle. It sounded like they were rummaging through drawers, the metal clanging against the desk dividers. I slowly pushed back my chair, the wheels rolling silently across the carpeted floor. I didn't want to make a sound, didn't want to alert whoever was in the next cubicle that I had heard them. I crept towards the partition, my hand trembling as I reached out to peek around the corner. My heart hammered in my chest, the blood rushing in my ears, almost drowning out the sounds coming from the next cubicle. I took a deep breath and swiftly peered around the partition. The cubicle was empty. There was no one there. The drawers were all closed, and there was nothing out of place. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, followed by a surge of confusion. I had been so sure I had heard someone in there. Had I imagined it? Was the stress of the deadline playing tricks on my mind? I practically ran to the elevator, my footsteps echoing in the deserted hallway. I kept glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see someone following me, their face obscured by the shadows. But the hallway remained empty, the only sound the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. I jammed my finger into the down button, the seconds stretching into an eternity as I waited for the elevator to arrive. Finally, the elevator doors slid open, and I practically jumped inside, hitting the button for the ground floor with more force than necessary. As the doors closed, sealing me inside the metal box, I leaned against the wall, taking deep breaths, trying to slow my racing heart. The elevator lurched into motion, the sudden movement making me jump. Just as I thought the elevator ride would never end, it jolted to a stop, the doors sliding open to reveal the empty lobby. The security guard, a burly man named Gus, looked up from his newspaper as I approached the desk.
Working late again, eh?
I hurried down the street, my footsteps echoing on the deserted sidewalk. The city felt different at this hour, deserted and menacing. The shadows seemed deeper, the buildings taller, looming over me like silent giants. Reaching my apartment building, I practically sprinted inside, fumbling with my keys in my haste to get safely behind my locked door. Inside my apartment, I finally allowed myself to breathe, the familiar surroundings a welcome contrast to the unsettling emptiness of my office building. I made myself a cup of chamomile tea, hoping to calm my nerves, and sank onto the couch, turning on the TV for some mindless distraction. But the images on the screen seemed distant, unreal, unable to penetrate the fog of unease that had settled over me. Just as I was starting to relax, the phone rang, the shrill sound piercing the silence of my apartment. I jumped, my heart leaping into my throat. The caller ID flashed an unknown number. I took a deep breath and answered the phone. "Hello?" I said, my voice trembling slightly. Silence. I held the phone to my ear, listening intently, but there was no response, only the faint hum of the line.
Just when I was about to hang up, thinking it was a prank call, I heard a voice on the other end. It was a man's voice, low and muffled, as if he were speaking from a distance. "Don't go back," the voice whispered, the words barely audible. "It's not safe."
I froze, my blood turning to ice. I paced around my apartment, my thoughts a jumbled mess. The phone call had shaken me to my core. The voice, the warning, the sudden disconnection, it was all too strange, too unsettling. I glanced at the clock on the wall, 2:18 a.m. The city outside my window was dark and silent, the streets below deserted. I tried to convince myself that it was just a prank call, a cruel joke by some kids. But the voice on the phone had sounded so real, so urgent. And the warning, "Don't go back," kept echoing in my mind. I decided to call the police. I picked up the phone and dialed 911, my hands trembling. I spent the rest of the night tossing and turning in bed, unable to sleep. The events of the previous night kept replaying in my mind, each playback amplifying my fear and confusion. The empty office, the strange noises, the phone call, it was all too much. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was in danger, that someone was watching me. As soon as the sun rose, I called my boss and told him I wouldn't be coming in. I didn't tell him about the events of the previous night, fearing he would think I was going crazy. I just said I wasn't feeling well, which wasn't entirely a lie. My mind was racing, my body exhausted from the lack of sleep. In the afternoon, I decided to go back to the office. I needed answers. The office was bustling with activity when I arrived. The usual daytime noises, phones ringing, keyboards clicking, colleagues chatting, were almost deafening after the eerie silence of the previous night. I greeted my colleagues with a forced smile, trying to appear normal. But inside, I was a bundle of nerves. I went straight to my desk, my heart pounding in my chest. I half expected to find something out of place, a message, a clue, anything to explain the events of the previous night. But my desk was exactly as I had left it, the computer screen displaying the unsaved document I had been working on. I tried to focus on my work, to lose myself in the familiar routine, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. During my lunch break, I decided to investigate. I went back to the cubicle where I had heard the noises the previous night. I was about to give up when I noticed something strange. There was a small rectangular indentation on the desk, as if someone had placed a heavy object there for a long time. I ran my fingers over the indentation, my mind racing. It was then that I noticed the nameplate on the desk. It read, Richard Davies. Richard Davies. I knew that name. He was a former employee, a software developer who had worked for the company a few years ago. I remembered hearing that Richard had died a few months ago. It was a tragic accident, a car crash. I stumbled back from the desk, my heart pounding in my chest. Richard Davies was dead. He had died months ago. So who had I seen in the office that night? Who had made that phone call, warning me not to go back? I felt a cold shiver run down my spine as a terrifying thought took root in my mind. What if it wasn't Richard's voice on the phone? What if it was something else, something masquerading as my deceased colleague, something trapped in the office, something tethered to this world by unfinished business? I fled the office, my mind a whirlwind of fear and confusion. I haven't been back since. I quit my job the next day, unable to bear the thought of setting foot in that building again. The experience left an indelible mark on my psyche, a constant reminder that there are things in this world we don't understand, things that go bump in the night, things that defy explanation. To this day, I still don't know what I encountered that night. Was it Richard's ghost, trying to warn me? Or was it something else, something more sinister? The question haunts me, a chilling reminder that some mysteries are best left unsolved.